we can start.
So hello, everyone, and welcome to the third In Situ webinar that explores how does cultural and creative work contribute to place-based sustainability and resiliency. My name is Mark Rainey. I'm working with the In Situ project at the University of Galway, and I'm looking forward to welcoming our panelist, Patrick Collins from the University of Galway, Jude Ortiz from the NORDIK Institute at Algoma University, Leandro Pisano from the Interzona Cultural Association, Marketa Doleshova from Aalto University and the Creatures Project, and Arya Lematinen from the University of Turku and the Diske Project. And I'll also let my co-host Ieva Zemite introduce herself as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to see you here. So I'm working at the Institute of Arts and Cultural Studies at the Latvian Academy of Culture, and also I'm a program director of the joint MA program of Latvian Academy of Culture and Riga Technical University, Creative Industries and Growth Management. And so today I also will present just briefly a project which I'm leading besides also In Situ Latvian Lab, and that's rethinking creative cities, networks, intermediaries, and development prospects to get into deeper discussion. So our aim today is to discuss as much as possible and create like a safe environment to ask questions and to collaborate.
Great. Well, I'm Nancy Duxbury. I'm a researcher at the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra in Portugal, and we are the coordinator of the In Situ project. I'd like to begin by thanking Mark and Eva for their willingness to step forward and host this webinar, as well as our guests this time. And for all of you for participating with us for the next 2 hours to explore this what's turned out to be a very popular topic. Apologies for the brief delay at the beginning, but now we're up and running. And just to let you know a little bit about the In Situ project, the full name is Place-Based Innovation of Cultural and Creative Industries in Non-Urban Areas. Our focus is shining a spotlight on the creative work, the culture-based work that's being done outside of big metropolitan centers, and to learn more about the challenges and the opportunities and the realities of these workers in these areas and how they connect to the places and the communities where they reside and work. And in that, the whole concept of place-based innovation from a creative and artistic lens is something we're very interested in exploring. The project itself has 3 main areas: research, both European-wide and focused in 6 lab areas across Europe, which are in the Azores, Ireland, Iceland, Finland, Latvia, and Croatia, as well as a capacity building program and a policy recommendations program as we go forward beyond the time of the project, to hopefully pick up some of the work that's been done by creators in non-urban areas in the past, bringing their voices and others forward, learning about the realities of doing cultural work in these environments, and hopefully creating a framework for a better policy and program world structure to enable them to be stronger and more sustainable going forward, and to contribute more to the communities where they work. And that's enough from me for now. I'd like to turn it back to Mark and Eva to continue. And thank you again very much for everyone for being here. And we continue.
Thank you, Nancy. Just the format for the webinar. We're going to let each of our guests, panelists, give a 5-minute talk and presentation about their work. And then we have some questions some set questions that we're going to give to our panelists and hear the responses and discussion. And then we'll open up the discussion to everyone in attendance to ask questions as well. Feel free to use your raise the hand icon, or you can write your question in the chat as well, and we'll follow that up. So I might invite our first panelist, Pat, if you would like to give a brief introduction to yourself and work.
Thanks, Mark. And hello, everybody. Thanks very much for your organization, and thanks very much to everybody for your attendance and for your interest in this area. I will be brief in terms of introducing myself. I'm an economic geographer based here at the University of Galway, and I teach a number of subjects at undergraduate and postgraduate level, all kind of in around the area of equity, justice and sustainable development. Most broadly, when I describe what it is that I'm most interested in, it would be about the distribution of wealth spatially. In terms of my research output, particularly in relation to today's webinar, it's a case of an ever evolving story. That story was initially concerned in terms of what my research focused on was the location decision, particularly of technology companies in Ireland. So I was very concerned about the foreign direct investment story in Ireland and what it was beyond the tax incentives that attracted 9 of the top 10 technology companies to locate in Ireland. And in that discussion, through a couple of years trying to get to the bottom of that story, issues of culture, creativity, and the uniqueness of place started to arise. And that kind of pushed me in something of a departure towards the area that I currently find myself in, which is reflected in some of the papers that I have up here. And the main image, which is my recently launched book, launched as of last week, where I'm trying to understand the role that culture and creativity plays in the development of places. I would say that I'm most interested in telling that story, particularly from the non-usual places, particularly from places on the edge. I think the story about culture and creativity, not to say that it has been fully told, but has tended to kind of be biased towards greater metropolitan areas and urban settlements. And there's a logic, an understandable logic for that. But what we need to do is, I think, understand that it is not simply a case of transplanting our knowledge about culture and creativity in large urban areas and applying it to non-urban areas. We need to consider the distinct nature of culture and creativity, its role and its interplay with geography and the place that inspires it, to better understand how it is that we can support it and encourage it into the future. Ta-da! Sorry, that was a, I should explain that Flickr presentation there. Sorry, this is an upload of geotagged photos from the western coast of Ireland, which includes our in situ lab region there. It's a time series of where people were taking photos over the course of a year, and it is part of telling a story, of what makes places, how we can understand places. It's a very different kind of way of looking at issues like attractiveness, issues like beauty, and the particular kinds of Ireland that have been shared on upload platform Flickr. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Pat. I might ask our next speaker, Jude, if she'd like to introduce herself and your work as well.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to share my screen and slideshow. Just a second. Got to get back to here. Good. Okay. So I'm based in Northern Ontario, Canada, which is a vast, geographically diverse, sparsely populated area that's adjacent to the Great Lakes. And in the map, it's represented by the red area. It's slightly larger than the landmass of UK and France combined. It has about 78,000 people, so that allows for about 10.3 square kilometers per person. It's resource extractive economies, so primarily forestry and mining, and we're caught in this boom-bust cycle. And there's primarily or largely three cultural heritage groups. So Anglophone, which includes the settler communities and the newcomers, the Indigenous communities, and the Francophone communities. So I'm a researcher and a visual artist, a studio goldsmith. So I'm situated within the community that I'm investigating. And
Sorry, Jude, we can't see your screen.
Can't see my screen?
Yes, we can't see your screen. Can you try
Yes.
Oh.
Sharing. Share screen. Share screen. Share. Can you see it now?
There we go.
That's it? You can see it?
In now. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Almost there.
That's the first. Are we good to go?
Yes, we're good to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm a researcher and a visual artist, a studio goldsmith. So I'm situated in the community that I'm investigating. And my research investigates the contribution of the arts in building healthy, resilient communities. And it looks at the artist's role, the producer's role in the development of the CCI sector and broader community development. So to gain an understanding of their role in the development of the CCI ecosystem, I focused on the artists and their engagement in the creative practice that produces the cultural goods. And for me, that's where everything begins. So following the value chain, the research looks at the relationships between the producers and the consumers and the broader community. So when I speak of creative practice, it's an umbrella term. Just engagement in creative expression, film, performance, visual arts, heirlooms, and artists, producers is also an umbrella term. And that refers to the people who create the cultural goods, regardless of their skill level, and it's not dependent on them being employed in the sector. So the research reveals how engaging in creative practice and with other producers and consumers, it builds resilience and fosters the development of local cultural-based economies. So it looks at the underlying processes that underpin sustainable development. And it highlights the leadership role that rural artists, producers, are playing in providing the critical culture sector organizational and built infrastructure that facilitates broader community resilience. So I'm looking at creative practice And it's all about relationship building and problem solving with self, others, in the context of the place or the land. And it's a very transformative process. So it transforms people and materials. And these processes help build resilience characteristics in people to be able to adapt and transition. And it builds, transforms materials into cultural goods. So it scales up from individual creative practice. The next cycle is sectorial creative practice and cross-sectorial creative practice. So engagement and interaction scales up resilience. So throughout the day, I'll start to unpack some of these ideas through the various topics that we're discussing today. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jude, for that. And I'll bring in our next panelist, Leandro. Leandro, is it okay if you introduce yourself and your work?
Of course. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Just introducing briefly myself and my practice. Okay. I am a curator, a writer, and independent researcher, based in the south of Italy, and interested in intersections between art, sound, and technoculture. The specific area of my research deals with political ecology of rural, marginal, and remote territories. I have founded and directed the Interferenze New Arts Festival that was held in 2003, and frequently I'm involved in projects on electronic and sound art. I have curated sound art exhibition in Australia, Chile, and Japan. I've also conducted several presentations, conferences, and workshops in different universities or during events related with new media aesthetics, design, sound, and territorial regeneration processes in more than 30 countries worldwide. I'm here represented the Interzona, Associazione Culturale Interzona. I am the president of this organization that works to revalorize rural and marginal territories through studies and through field research and educational projects focused on sound, the arts, and technocultures. Our organization was founded in 2003 in a small village called San Martino Valle Caudina, on the border between two rural regions, Irpinia and Sannio Beneventano in south of Italy. And starting with here are some images from the festival through the years. I'm showing you now. And starting with the International Arts and New Technologies Festival Interferenze, our organization has experimented over the years and in different territories and different rural regions, Irpinia, Fortore Beneventano, in Puglia, but also other regions in Sicily, for example, other regions of South Italy, a series of hybrid formats, residencies, laboratories, workshops, and field research and study projects converged in a research platform focused on the concept of neo-rurality, in which multidisciplinary and critical approaches inspired by new media studies, but also cultural and post-colonial studies intersect. Thank you.
Thank you, Leandro. And I'll invite our next panelist up, if it's okay, Marketa.
Yes, hi. I will also share the screen. So let's see if it works. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can. That's great.
Perfect. I should start from here though. Sorry. Yeah, okay. So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Markéta Dolíšová. I'm a practice-based researcher and curator working at Aalto University and also with various independent creative collectives. And for 3 years, I was also involved in a research project called Creatures that I'm going to present today on behalf of the whole Creatures Consortium. So Creatures, or Creative Practices for Transformational Futures, was a Horizon 2020 project that investigated the potential of creative practices in art, design, and related cultural sectors to support shifts towards more socially and ecologically sustainable ways of life. So our aim was really to bring together diverse creative practices from various fields to identify how they contribute to sustainable transformations and develop insights that would be accessible to both the practitioners themselves, to help them sort of focus their efforts, and also for policymakers and other powerful sustainability actors to help them recognize the merit of employing creative approaches in sustainability action. So the consortium, Creatures Consortium, involved 11 partners, 4 universities, 5 arts organizations, and 2 nonprofits, who work together quite closely around the structure of 6 work packages. But in reality, it was a little bit more complicated and entangled. So we were around 60 people working together quite intensively on a regular daily basis, blending our experiences from various fields and working really in quite entangled ways, where, for instance, the artists were acting as co-researchers and researchers were contributing their creative inputs to the artistic productions. And this structure, this entangled structure, afforded really for emergent and relational ways of working that were sprouting from the sense of openness to reimagining how transformative creative practices can unfold and what they can do. So nothing was sort of set in stone in Creatures. There was a sort of main project structure that involved 4 components, which were the laboratory, where we co-developed new creative practices, or so-called experimental productions, or XPs. The observatory, that was focused on observing the XPs, but also other creative practices existing outside of Creatures. The evaluation segment, that developed new evaluation measures and tools while drawing on the knowledge that was derived from the XPs. And then the engagement component that facilitated various public engagement occasions. I will focus especially today on the collaboratory or laboratory, where I was involved as the main curator or work package leader, and that formed the creative core of the project and gathered 20 experimental productions that had very diverse formats and address a variety of eco-social themes, ranging from more than human care to community justice, or, for instance, transformative economies. So to give you very brief examples, for instance, the Open Forest XP consisted of a series of experimental walks with various forests around the world that invited participants to walk with and make sense with various more than human forest ecologies and co-create feral forest datasets. We also had the Commons Poly project, which is an open source board game encouraging collaborative approaches to the use of public resources and supporting peer learning about the topics of commons and commoning. Or we had the View from the Window project, which is a long-term artistic initiative that engages socially disadvantaged citizens in Poland, in Poznan, and builds neighborhoodly relations by hosting informal picnics, for instance, and making a safe space for locals to spend time together. So these XPs, or actually all 20 of them, were presented at various public occasions, such as exhibitions and festivals and workshops. And they also provided opportunity for the whole Creatures team to come together around them, study them, and co-develop them to learn from their processes of making and doing and understanding eco-social change. So the XP's data that we collected in this sort of transdisciplinary manner then provided the key material for the evaluation work that was done in Creatures, where we developed and tested multiple new approaches to help various stakeholders, including ourselves, of course, to better understand the transformational potential of creative practice. And these insights and tools and experiences were compiled at the end of the project into the so-called Creatures Framework, which is a website that you can visit that presents all the project outcomes in one place. So the framework can be explored through 4 different user journeys tailored to researchers, policymakers, creative practitioners, and funders. And includes all kinds of tools and toolkits, such as, for instance, the creative pathways, which emerged from the mapping of how different creative projects work towards change, or, for instance, very feral policy recommendations, or a tool that we called 9 Dimensions, that provides basically recommendations for evaluating creative practices that might be useful for policymakers as well as for funders. And yeah, I think I will stop here and thank you all for listening again on behalf of the whole Creatures Consortium. And yeah, looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you, Marketa. And yeah, thank you for telling us about the Creatures project. I will pass over to our final panelist, Arya. And I welcome Arya to come and present her work and research as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will also share my screen here. Hello, everybody. I come from Turku School of Economics at the University of Turku. And I am going to tell about a recent project, also Horizon 2020, and also after the project, the research I have been conducting with my colleagues. So this is an article that we are working on at the moment, and it's about creative city brand competitiveness. And we had this DISC project developing inclusive and sustainable creative economies 2019-2022, and a leader was the University of Turku and entrepreneurship there. And I come from Pori campus, and we were also involved in the project. And there were other participants came from London, King's College, and Italy, Gran Sasso Science Institute, as well as Stockholm School of Economics in Riga, and media agency Europe, Comedie Culture and Media Agency Europe, and then Trans-Europe Horse Network. And this is not rural areas actually, but I suppose since the theme of the project is quite similar than in this project, that is the reason we were invited also to speak about this project. But we had 10 case studies, case cities here around Europe. So if you are interested, so you can read more about it in the websites. And shortly, what about this research is about? So we are focusing on, since I am a researcher in marketing and especially interested in branding. So our study also focuses on city branding and its importance to city development. And in our case, so we consider these creative and cultural industries as a driver of the city's economic growth and competitiveness. And we are exploring how a city brand can be different from its competitors in the context of creative economy. And all the data were collected in 2020, which was the first year of COVID. And that's why we are looking at CCIs also from that point of view. And this is what we are heading to research now in this context. So we have a creative sphere here, and we have interviewed these actors in the creative sphere, which are artists, creative workers, and so on. You can see here in the slide. And what we are especially interested is how this image of the place is planning kind of bottom up, so that the actors which are mentioned here, so that they are participating in this image planning, not only the authorities or government. So we want to see how the image is created in the grassroots level of the creative sphere, so to say. And the research was conducted, as I already told, in the context of CCIs, and it began in 19 and was 3 years. And the kind of data we were using, we had first to read and analyze academic and policy documents in each of these cities. And then we had also semi-structured interviews in all of these cities, all of the 10 cities. So we have quite a lot of data. And among these interviews, there were both local cultural and creative workers and entrepreneurs, freelancers, volunteers, community groups and influencers, as well as policymakers and higher education institutions. So that was my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Arja, for that presentation on the DISCA project. I'm going to pass over to my my co-host Ieva now, who will lead us into the next section of our webinar today.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you all panelists for such a great introduction to your researches, projects, and also practices. I would like to start with a brief presentation of the research, ongoing research. We're thinking creative cities, networks, intermediaries, and development prospects to start our discussion. So firstly, the discussion we are raising, it's quite familiar with the main question we asked within our research: what approaches are used for the CCIs to be able to fully express their potential as promoters of place sustainability? And of course, there are a lot of challenges arise. And so this presentation will see mainly the challenges articulated and seen as the main important ones from the perspective of creative entrepreneurs, policymakers, and NGOs from Valmiera city, which is also one of In Situ labs and representing Latvia. So if we speak about first challenge, that it comes to the question of policy making, where cultural policy focus quite a lot to numbers, and those large audiences are still seen as valuable ones. Meanwhile, contemporary art and events which are just for few people important lags behind. And creative entrepreneur also asked this question: what if contemporary art actually changes the lives, but just for 5 people? How we could promote that? Another challenge is based on the problems tackled by representatives from the cultural communities and NGOs mostly, where those are the ones providing actual cultural life, and those are the ones who are those active cultural contributors, but they are a bit bored. Because they limited options to experience high quality cultural events. That's one of the things if we speak about those who are organizing those cultural events. Another challenge is connected with the aim to pull in people. And from the perspective of the city, it's quite important, and also culture, those producers who organize are moving out of institutional places, are moving to neighborhoods and are actually pushing a lot of activities going on in those surroundings and neighborhoods, but still people are a bit scared and not really appreciating it as a value. So that's still a discussion, still a question how to do it in the best way. So then again, one more challenge from the community perspective, because they are seeing an opportunity either as a safeguarding cultural heritage or seeking for innovative solutions, new ways to interact. And it's not seen as a common experience where those both respect cultural heritage and also new modern vision, new social innovations are valued as like both hands could be together. Then one more challenge appeared, which is connected with the cross-sectoral cooperation in non-urban areas. And there, for example, speaking of Valmiera case, those are limited due to the lack of connector intermediary. Of course, there are intermediaries and connectors, but still just some projects are going beyond one sector and like really are cooperating. It's still a huge potential, but due to the limited resources, we are there where we are. And the last not least challenge I would like to share is as the way how we acknowledge the culture as a value, because culture matters in placemaking within culture sector, no doubts, and nobody doubts that. But outside culture sector, there are still questions raised, and there is a quite huge focus on different kind of measurements and asking to give proof that culture like really contributes and is a value. So those are the main starting points for discussion, but I would like to conclude my presentation with already the first question to our panelists. I hope my presentation just encourage audience to think about questions for later. For now, the first question from our side: what are the practices that CCIs used and which may be considered contributions to sustainable development from your experience, from your projects? Patrick, would you like to start?
Of course I would. Thank you very much for that interesting presentation. Yeah, you got me thinking an awful lot in that, and even Arya's presentation as well got me thinking about whether we end up putting too much pressure on cultural and creative industries to show us what sustainable development should look like. I mean, I come at this from a number of different perspectives, and I can speak more specifically to my region and indeed to my small city, Galway in the west of Ireland. I know, and I've spent a lot of time with the CCI sector here, and I feel a real sense of, disaffection on behalf of cultural and creatives, and how their output is used by the city and by the region to brand the region as creative, and how, if at all, any of that is fed back to the artists that actually generate this work that the city has used and the county has used to brand itself on. But to speak, I can come back to that point again, because I think it is a big one. It is a big one. But to speak specifically to the question, I mean, I would say that CCIs, are varied and different. I mean, we're talking at one end of a spectrum from pottery to the other end of a spectrum involving virtual production. But what they're all trying to do is they're trying to make a living, and when it comes to places that I tend to focus on, it's difficult because they're usually further away from the bigger markets. So it is difficult. But one thing that I see is innately sustainable in their practice across the board is this kind of search for authenticity, and it's the authenticity of the voice, and that comes through in many different kind of formats, from weaving and basket making all the way through to documentary making. And it's interesting when you consider that versus the way the rest of the world is going, that CCIs have a very interesting business model that is distinctly different from the broader approaches towards massification, if I can use that word, which is, part of the grand industrial process that has swept across the developed world over the last couple of decades. So I look at CCIs as sustainable in how they can show us that their practices are part of a sustainable future. They're part of a sustainable future that are moving towards a different business model that we've tended to use in industrial processes, towards a more tailored model that is place-based, as it is inspired by the places that they're in. They're serving their places that they're in, not just in terms of their output, but in terms of the vast array of spillovers that CCIs have in their places.
Do you find it like those models are economically tangible, that you can really see, here we see an opportunity which might be an option also for others, and we could somehow share those experiences, or those are so tailor-made, that those are so specific that they will contribute to those particular places locally, and that's it?
It's difficult to speak across the broad sector, but I mean, what I would say is that what the CCIs have in general been doing for the past 5 decades, let's say, is they've been pursuing project-based work. They've been moving from commission to commission to commission, and we see that that's a business model that has been adopted by the traditional economic sectors, so that we see more and more sectors following the line of the creative industries, where we have very non-secure employment contracts, high turnover, varied and different kind of focuses, changing rapidly. So I mean, it's of little consolation to CCIs to tell them that it's okay. The rest of the world is following your trend, but key in it is, is again that word authenticity. It is about narratives. It is about telling a story, and those kind of things, as I said, from craft production to audiovisual production, those are the kind of things that are very difficult to subject to the kind of grand narrative of industrialization and standardization. Those are the things that are unique to the CCIs, and whose demand, from the consumer perspective, I don't think is going away, and I think is only going to grow.
Yes, thank you very much, Marketa. From your perspective, would you like to add something as well?
I think that, from my specific perspective, I have more experience with working with artistic collectives rather than with CCIs. And there is maybe something common in terms of the practice-based situated way of working, which is something that became kind of very apparent or important in creatures, that any kind of creative transformation that these artistic projects are usually able to do comes from a process that needs a lot of time. It is based in forming relations. It is based in practice that can't be really planned step by step and sort of forecasted in advance. So it is often quite impossible to give clear research plans or definitions of what will happen in every single step. So there needs to be some sort of trust into what is emerging, that the practice will somehow unfold and reach some goal, or maybe some other goal as well. But this is something that we have been encountering quite a lot, that it's especially in terms of evaluation and also funding, this is quite often a problem, where we often have to really provide very clear research plan of what is going to happen at every single stage of a transformational creative project. But then things often go differently because relations are forming differently in different places. And that is a bit problematic in terms of how are we able to actually justify our projects to the powerful actors, decision makers. So that is probably one of the sort of key observations that I would bring in on the table from the Creatures project.
Thank you very much. I see a connection here with the practice-based approach also from an artist is a central resource, if I may say so. From the Jude's perspective as well, would you like also to contribute a bit?
Yes, I would. And the points already made really resonate with me, but I've taken a slightly different perspective in responding to this question. And when I think of what practices that CCIs use, I really look at the foundational practice of creativity and creative practice. And I think of it in terms of communities becoming more sustainable. They need to develop the capacity to adapt and transition. Right? So, and community culture really plays a foundational role in its ability to engage citizens and learn how to become more adaptive, develop those economies, and as well develop those economies. So I'm looking at my research, and it really indicates that there's significant parallels between creative practice that CCIs engage and community development. Both are underpinned by creative processes that generate outputs that are intended to advance society. Both are learning about how to change. It involves reflecting on the past, visioning new ways of being, seeing things in different light, and building new relationships to make sense and meaning of everyday decisions that we make. So both practices, creative practice and community development, they lead to the creation of products. So the arts manifest cultural goods, and community development creates planning documents, the visions, the identification of assets, the SWOTs, analysis, etc. So when I think about community development, I think of it as an act of creating community. it's a process. And developers who adopt more inclusive and emergent and responsive community development approaches, it shifts development from being top-down to community-based development. And it also shifts the focus from what to develop, like the outcome, to how to develop them, the process. And it allows space for engaging citizens in the development of cultural plans, increases people's creative capacity, and the space for people to express their aspirations. And it generates more innovative solutions and pathways forward. And while it does that, it fosters the social capital development, political will, collective will to address the community issues, and perseverance that will help people push through those challenging times. So both the arts and community development sectors could benefit from a deeper understanding of each other's role in sustainability, and it would assist in bridging relationships and support shifting community development to being a more active and dynamic and creative practice, which presenters have mentioned that they want that it is a creative practice and they do need to engage, and so see the actors in the creation of the creative sphere. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see this act of creating as a common ground to build up. Leandro, I see that you also are ready to contribute and give us another perspective.
Yes, thank you. I think that CCIs are, in a certain sense, a guarantor of sustainability when considering how culture is a determinant for achieving social welfare, and it is strategic asset for building the future Europe. As such, it must be valorized by promoting a multidisciplinary approach that interweaves technology, economic development, and social innovation to ground activities and public and private governance models to support stakeholders in improving services and products with a constant focus on digital empowerment on the one hand and integral, social, environmental, and economic sustainability on the other. Strengthening and developing the presence of CCIs represents a commitment that is positioned in the midst of the socio-cultural transition underway, and it intends to support it through research, the production and promotion of tools, and development of a project and the activation of processes of participation and networking that place the system of production and cultural heritage at the center of reflection and activities with a transversal and a cross-sectoral approach. An approach that is in line, of course, with the vision expressed, for example, and promoted through international planning documents. For example, I'm referring particularly to the 2030 agenda, for sustainability, and sees in the strengthening of the CCIs a very important tool to support the cultural system and its capacity to permeate and become permeable to other disciplines and spheres. Generally, over the last 2 decades, with a special acceleration in the recent years, we have observed forms of, I'm referring specifically here to the local context here in Italy, we have observed forms of cultural organization, festivals, artist residencies, experience in the recovery and beautification of urban decor, experimentation with the new forms of craftsmanship, and events organized, for example, in rural areas, and not for their returnings in economic terms, but also as opportunities to redesign country spaces, to connect pleasure and emotion to rural spaces. No, these are new ways of re-inhabiting rural and mountain areas, for example, freed from the inferiority and marginality complex insufflated by several centuries of urban industrial centric paradigms. It is precisely in the order of culture that one can think of re-establishing a fruitful relationship between the younger generations and depopulated territories, and at the same time intercepting a new time of people interested to innovation and experimentation, social development and inclusion and sustainability. For example, healthy agri-food production that respects the environment and animals. I think that this type of local actors is oriented with towards holistic well-being and solidarity, increasingly taking into account also post-human and post-liberal forms of coexistence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to clarify, is there any like tips and tricks how would we could help to our CCIs to look for, not just CCIs, I will speak about culture professionals to collaborate outside of their field to create those cross-sectoral collaborations, how to foster this happening, because as I mentioned, we have a challenge there.
Well, of course, I think it's really fundamental and a crucial point to enhance the cross-cultural collaboration between CCIs, especially in a moment when, for example, here in Italy, there is a big crisis with political, institutional policies in cultural sectors, no? And this requires, I think, more alliances and also ways, strategies that have to be created and established by CCIs to have a new perspective in terms of collaboration and synergies. And I think that, for example, in Italy, we recently we have a new tool that is called in RUNS. It's a national register of third sectors and for CCIs, for example, and non-profit organization. And this also can be a good starting point, I think, for creating new possibilities, synergies and alliances that are of course very important in this sense to have to create a future scenarios in which culture is more and more important also for creating I think a better way of living for rural and marginal communities.
Thank you very much. Arya, would you like to contribute also to the first question?
Thank you. There have been a lot of discussion already, but maybe an example of my data from my data. So I think that would represent quite nicely what have been talking about this cross-cultural collaboration as regards also sustainability development. So there, in one of the cities, there is a music venue, a music lab, which is run by one of the informants, and he's telling about this music lab also as a form of kind of social sustainability, because they also have a task to development this kind of young artists who maybe are not so are on the dark side of the society, so to say, and help them to come back to the society. So they think that they form a model for these young people who maybe in a form of this new activity, they can develop them to a better direction and keep their part of the society's wealthy. So like that, I think that would represent nicely what kind of sustainability there can be. Of course, there are a lot of examples, but just to name this one.
Thank you very much. We are moving forward. Mark, now it's time for the second question.
Yes. Thanks, everyone, for the discussion so far. At this stage in the questions, we're going to direct some of our questions to particular panelists. And I'd like to ask Jude this next question, and maybe others can join in after Jude's response. But yes, this question for Jude is, well, we've talked a lot about sustainability. It's in the title of the webinar, but there's a lot of discussion about what sustainability is. And one of the ways of approaching the concept of sustainability is through the 4 pillars approach, where sustainability operates in the economic domain, the environmental domain, the cultural domain, and the social domain. So I want to ask Jude, what is the interrelation between CCI practices and these 4 pillars of sustainability in non-urban areas?
Thank you, Mark. I have some slides I'd like to share for this, just to keep me on track and show some images. So I'm going to just do the share slide. Share slide. Good. Screen sharing, slideshow. Good. So I'd like to begin by focusing on the NORDIK Research Institute, where I'm based. It's a community-based research and development institute, and it's dedicated to building healthy resilience communities. Pardon? And we take holistic, strength-based approach to the 4 pillars, and we have the cultural pillar as the central and first pillar. So we understand that places are always becoming through culture. It's culture making and culture shifting. So we utilize a community development medicine wheel, where it's very process-based, and that builds respectful and transformational relationships between and among people and the land or place. So it provides opportunities for people to meet, build trust, identify issues, develop solutions, and act and implement them. And providing opportunities for people to meet and engage in these creative processes of problem solving, it builds trust that supports a shared understanding of the issues and develops solutions, and you can act and implement them. So, as I mentioned, the creative practice is about relationship building and problem solving, transformation of people into materials, and materials into tangible and intangible products. So as with community development wheel, creative practice provides that space to meet oneself and others and develop trust, identify issues, and develop solutions and act. So the intangible aspects that are built through creative practice that are increased adaptive capacity, transitioning through place, envisioning and seeing yourself through identity reformation, wellness, creativity. And the cultural products that are created are gifted, bartered, or sold in the marketplace. So it's developing both individual adaptive capacity and economies. So here you see the emergence of agency and culture-based economies through individual creative practice. And we all recognize that there's a significant spillover effect, particularly in rural areas where the artists or people engaged in the CCI sector tend to be part-time. And so when they work in other fields, that knowledge and skills are transferred over. So when we, so when we look at sectoral collaboration, we begin to build social capital that leads to a sense of community. And that sense of community really validates artistic identity because, and it's particularly important for rural artists because, again, they frequently work outside of the sector. And that social capital development provides opportunities for professional development. In rural areas, peer mentoring is the primary source of education due to limited formal opportunities. So in the products, they become more innovative and higher quality due to that feedback and interaction between the artists and the CCI people engaged in the sector and the increased skills. So when we look at the tangible things, the infrastructure also comes into play. So we get, we have the artists gathering and that they're collectively developing the critical organizational and built infrastructure, essentially the missing pieces that limit their creative potential and livelihood. So the infrastructure that the artists are creating really benefits not only the culture sector, but the broader community as well. They're organizing workshops, festivals, and developing creative spaces, the physical places that allow the people to meet and gather, produce and consume. And these places and spaces, they raise the visibility of artists and provide consumers, other tourists to access them. And that allows for the emergence of arts clusters and expanded cultural economies when they have opportunities and can get together for sector collaboration. When we look at cross-sectoral collaboration, we have increased adaptive capacity, labor force development, community identity, that placemaking aspects. And when we look at the tangible cultural products, they become even more diversified. So there's more engagement. And the infrastructure supports the creation of the creation and consumption of cultural goods. And that leads to the development of a rural social milieu. In urban centers, the cultural infrastructure is largely in place through private or public investment. But in rural communities, it's missing. And it's largely the artists who are providing the infrastructure for people to connect and interact. And that fosters the real social milieu and social change. Because the spaces they are providing are very welcoming to diverse people. And it facilitates the linking of the producers to the consumers and connect with artists, with community and broader community, and including the leaders and the decision-making. So we have a space where people can connect, share ideas, and generate connections of business opportunities or investment, and really begin to understand what the issues are in the various sectors and beyond the community, outside of the sector as well. So I see what the artists are doing in creating the infrastructure as they're creating transitioning spaces that are rich opportunities for generating that informal dialogue about sector issues and generating new pathways forward, as well as discussing pressing community issues. And so here, when there's cross-sectoral collaboration, you see the emergence of the rural social milieu, you see more integration of community of the arts in holistic community plans, you have place marketing, and you have the development of local and regional based economies. So I think the creative practice and the CCIs create the space and the means for cultural, social, economic, and environmental development. They provide the traditioning space, those intersections, the places and spaces that foster transformation. and the psychological room and the time and the actual physical place to engage with oneself and others. And they're doing that while simultaneously creating products that contribute to the quality of life and household income and the development of localized culture-based economies that can link regionally and globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude, for that that excellent response. And there's certainly the comparison between the urban and the non-urban, or the urban and the rural, where there's often in urban cultural spaces, there's existing infrastructure, whether that's private or public infrastructure, but it seems there's you've encountered something much more organic taking place, where the infrastructure and relations are created by the rural CCI practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
Before we maybe move on to the next question, I just want to open it up briefly to see if any of the other panelists would like to respond to Jude's comments or the question. But if not, I'll pass over to Ieva.
Yes, so next question will go to Leandro. So you, as an expert of redesigning the identity of rural areas, would definitely could give us an overview. What does culture-driven sustainable development look like? And do you have any examples of either best practices or total failures you would like to share with us in this case?
Thank you, Ieva. The recent debate on sustainable rural development has witnessed with a gradual shift from exclusive issues concerning the sustainability and economic replicability of product activities towards a growing focus on processes of transformation, social innovation, inclusion and participation of local populations in the countryside. This shift is oriented towards a new centrality of well-being, towards an accomplished sociality, social inclusion, formal and informal education, proposals, and finally towards a new relationship between spaces and time of life that would be at the origin of a new hierarchy between urban and rural, or at any rate to a profound redefinition and reshaping of the boundaries between margins and center. Increasing attention is also being paid to the development and revitalization of remote and fragile rural areas, to ecological and socio-cultural concerns and expectation, highlighting the positive impact of innovative projects and the presence of creative industries, no longer only in the avant-garde and experimental big cities, but increasingly in the rarefied and relaxed spaces of the countryside, albeit also reinterpreted in a sweetened key and often see from the outside with eyes that could be defined as urban. So the orientation is to work on rural contexts, depressed and peripheral and depopulated areas, so that they can experience a new effervescence and socio-cultural cohesion as a consequence of shared and co-constructed projects that insist on the value of local heritage and biocultural diversity, on the potential represented by traditional or ancient local activities, and rural practices renewed and revitalized in a framework of new innovative experiences and participatory processes, reactivating positive economic and social trends. Recently, a great debate has been ignited in Italy around the national strategy for inland areas, the SNAI, Strategia Nazionale per le Aree Interne. Researchers, activists, and representatives of local associations and institutions gathered around associative experience, such as the Riabitare l'Italia or the Fondazione Appennino, and so some less formalized collectives. There are a lot of them. So I could mention, for example, Dolomiti Contemporanee or Amidio di Treviri, to name but a few of the most relevant and innovative movements, festivals, residencies, and workshops inspired by the idea of restanza, the almost philosophical concept of remaining or returning to mountain, rural, and inland places. That was for the first time expressed by anthropologist, Italian anthropologist Vito Teti. I could also mention the manifesto of rural futurism. I'm going to show okay. The manifesto of rural futurism. Okay. Maybe you can share the. Yes, a document written by myself and the Italian curator Beatrice Ferrara. That was it's a document that deals with the idea of the possibility of imagining possible futures for rural communities that seems to be condemned to oblivion, the population and death in the narration of capitalism and metropolitanism. This is a project we have developed through the years, and it was presented, translated also in different languages. At the moment, we have this translation in Italian, English, Norwegian, Japanese, Korean, Mandarin, Chinese, Arabic, Portuguese, Greek, French, Finnish, and Spanish. This document deals specifically with this idea of reevaluating the rural areas as places of imagination of self-determinations for new possible futures, and with the idea that rurality is not something connected with only this nostalgic idea of the past that has to be obsessionally preserved, but is a dynamic component of contemporary world, and it is called also to have an active role in the global processes, economic, political processes, and cultural processes in the contemporary age. Of course, there are also a project. I have just mentioned some of the projects and idea developed recently in Italy about this regeneration of rural territories. But of course, there are also projects that, born on the wave of this drive towards the territorial regeneration of marginal and rural areas, have failed in their task. And the main reason, I think, is because of the social fragility of the context in which they have been operating, as well as the scant support provided by public institutions, as also I was mentioning before in the previous answer. I think that arts, creativity, and cultural development of fragile areas today also represent an economic adaptation strategy in response to the reduction of the other previously dominant activities in rural areas, such as agriculture, raw material extraction, wood and metals, fishing, and handicrafts, supporting the multifunctional model, based on the agro-food production intertwined with the different economies of hospitality and cultural events. And narrative and place-based narratives, especially, and participatory repertoires of local communities support the local economy and social change, re-articulating a relationship with the past local identity and present transformation in the face of the growing frictions of a post-capitalist economy based on the rhetoric of progress and indiscriminate growth. So looking at these contradictions from the interstices of rural and mountainous region and indigenous cultures implies reconsidering relationship with the environmental, rural ecotourism, sustainable agriculture, and questioning the recent reconnection of young people with the land that we are witnessing. In this framework, I think that contemporary arts and cultural activities that are also the main focus of many of CCIs can help promote respect, social cohesion, and inclusion, as well as a citizen participation and community empowerment, but also innovative visions and sustainable futures in the countryside. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing the manifesto of rural futurism. Is it an open source? Can we just translate it also?
Of course. More translation are welcomed.
Okay, thank you very much. I see already a question.
Yes, can I ask a question, Leandro?
Sure. Yes,
Of
please.
course.
My name is Georgi from Bulgaria, and
Hi,
I
Georgi.
want to ask you about the innovative movements and festivals and their names so I can check them out later. Thank you.
Of course, yes.
Can you write them in the chat, or
Yes, of
I
course.
can
I will
also
write
write
everything
them?
in the chat, of course.
Yeah,
Okay,
that would be
you
a
very
great approach to write it. Yeah, so we can move forwards. And the next question, please, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Leandro. My next question, I'm going to ask Patrick Collins this question. We've talked about some of the key concepts around the webinar, like sustainability, but another key kind of concept is place-based development and place-based sustainability. And the idea of something being place-based, it kind of emphasizes local agency and geographical context, the particular context of a place. It would seem that this concept of place-based sustainability would involve a range of institutions and people and communities. And I want to ask Pat, what role do CCIs have in building these cross-sectoral collaborations, if any? And are there examples of successes or failures?
Thanks, Mark. And thank you for including the if any. I mean, again, is it the role of CCIs to develop cross-sectoral collaboration? I'm not sure. Of course, it's not. CCIs have culture and creativity to make. That's their job. But there are a couple of interesting instances locally that I'll just show you quick pictures of, and I don't want to take too much time here either. But for any of you that have visited Galway city, a population of around 90,000 people, you will end up just by the flow of pedestrian traffic being taken to this area of the city. It's called Quay Street, which is, again, an area that the city has used to brand itself on. All streets in Galway do not look like this. There's plenty of very mundane looking streets in Galway. But there's an interesting story behind this street, and that I remember when I grew up in Galway in the 1980s, this was a derelict street, a no-go area. But it took a Spanish street theatre company called Els Comediants to come to Galway as part of the Galway International Arts Festival and get us all to re-see the value of this place. So they had a street theatre performance under the theme of, or the name of death, where they used the streetscape. And what it did was act as a way to get the population to see their place differently. And since then, investment has come, and it has become something of the jewel of the tourism crown in Galway. So there's lots in that, lots. I won't go into, because we don't have the time here to unpack it fully. But speaking of place-based development, though, what we have done in the university, in a particular project, again using the International Arts Festival, was inviting them to bring Luke Durham's Mars as a piece of public sculpture for people to come and see as part of the Arts Festival. But we explicitly placed it in a derelict area of the city. And we used it as an attractor to get people to that derelict area. And over the course of 4 days, we asked them to participate in place articulation. So the Mars rendition was fine. It could have been any piece of art, but you know, it was in a festival program and it got people down there. We got 10,000 people over the course of 10 days. And we managed to engage with about 2,500 of them. And you'll see the board sitting behind me here that I just took a picture and threw up on it, where we got to ask them questions about, you know, things that Leandro has talked about and Jude has talked about, you know, what kind of place we want to make. So we're using art, culture, creativity as an entry point into a conversation that, you know, it's also a particular entry point, you know, using art. It's a particular entry point to get people to open their minds to consider future uses for places. And that's really interesting. But I mean, in your question, the question you gave me, at least, what are the barriers to this? You know, what's to be done with this? What's to be done with all that we have gathered and that we've analyzed? I mean, the results are there and we've shared them publicly. But what's to be done? How is it to be enacted upon? And that's much more difficult, of course. But it speaks to issues of local agency. You know, when you're talking about 10,000 people expressing a desire for something to be put in a place, is it on a local authority to respond to that desire and go ahead and put it in that place? Well, you know, theoretically, in a democracy, it should be, but the reality is, of course, very different, because this is subject to the same forces that Leandro talked about in terms of capitalism. And it is a place that 10,000 people can't afford to put the money in, to buy it, to render it in the way that they want to see it. But to the broader question of the role of CCIs, I mean, that's what they're here for. They're here to make their products, to enable us all to dream of alternative futures. And that's the key aspect that culture and creativity brings to the table. What it actually needs to do in terms of articulating that, in terms of organizing that, I don't know. Hopefully nothing. You know, again, it's about putting these weights on top of CCIs. It's an unnecessary weight. It's difficult enough for them to make art in this place. We don't want to be asking them to also organize other sectors to come together. But they do, and that is important. Before I just finish, no, I'll tell you what, I'll finish there because I know we're pressed for time. Thanks.
Thanks, Pat, for that answer and those examples as well. I think I'll pass on to Ieva again.
Yeah, thank you very much. And now comes a question to Marketa. And the question is, what strategies are there for maintaining and sustaining collaborations?
Well, my short answer is love. And I actually mean it. I think that, well, for me, maintaining any sort of meaningful collaborations in the context of working towards better futures really requires attention to what is happening in our lives of the collaborators, not only in terms of working on a project together, but really what is happening in our everyday lives, because it's such an inseparable part of any creative work towards better future. The separation between everyday life and work is, I think, not big or not existent. And this is something that actually, since I'm like talking here sort of on behalf of the Creatures Project, this came to us quite strong during the project. Maybe because we started when the COVID pandemic started in 2020, so suddenly there were so many changes happening in our lives, not just as a consortium of researchers and policymakers and artists, but also in our everyday lives, where we suddenly had to replan, rethink, reimagine pretty much everything about the project. But we had to do it with care for what can we do as individuals. Suddenly there were no rules that would be applicable to everyone in terms of, for instance, their expertise or the institution that they are affiliated with. We had to start really taking care of each other in terms of ourselves as individuals. One thing that actually this was also projected or sort of represented in some of the tools or the outcomes of the project. So when I was talking before about the Creatures Framework, where we presented several methods, suggestions, recommendations, tools for how to work towards better futures, there is this tool called Creative Pathways, which was based on close collaboration and observation of 150 creative projects from all around the world, where we were interviewing the artists and asking them, so what are your strategies for working towards change? And based on that, we kind of distilled 25 pathways for working towards eco-social change. And one of the pathways is called transformative friendships. And I will just read out loud the little description of this pathway. Transformative friendships occur when we allow ourselves to be changed by another person. Transformative friends hold us inside a community. They provide support and encouragement, and also constructive critique and tender accountability. They are often unrecognized outputs of creative work. And I think that especially the last sentence is quite interesting for me, that this is something that we tend to not take seriously. It's not something that is taken into account, for instance, in terms of, again, funding applications, or if we are evaluating how successful our creative practice is. The way how we care for ourselves and how we maintain friendships is not evaluation metrics. But for me, it is really quite important. It's connected to the willingness to listen, to really engage in deep listening to each other. And this willingness to kind of go beyond predefined roadmaps and rules and guidelines. Again, in the context of working in international consortium, we all have to follow some kind of rules that are defined. But then if you look at ourselves, where we are based in different countries, for instance, coming from different geographical and cultural, but also economical contexts, these rules shouldn't be applied by default to everyone. And this really requires time and care and this willingness to actually see what are the needs of all the people that are coexisting together in some consortium and who are collaborating towards something that if they mean it seriously, it's really necessarily part of everyday life. So yeah, I would say that my answer is love.
Thank you very much for sharing. And those transformative friendships, we should take as also one of our outputs of our results. How it's so to make friendships. I remember that's also was one of the aims when we started to discuss it within community, what you would like to achieve. So thank you very much, Mark. No, I think it's your turn.
Yes, so we have another question, a kind of penultimate question, and I'd like to ask Arya this question, and it's how should CCIs and local and regional authorities interact and collaborate? We've talked about sustaining networks and these collaborations. So the question is more specifically about the interaction between creatives and local and regional authorities. Are there successful examples? Are there any failures? I'll pass that on to you, Arja.
Thank you very much. I will share here some points from these cities. So I take a couple of cities here in order to show some examples. So Chatham is one of these towns, and there, of course, we have to take in consideration what is the kind of business big picture which is there, and they have strong IT technology and computer services, and then this is it's important to have a kind of way who is going to take a lead in this kind of relationships, and here one of the respondents mentioned the idea of a hub of creating cluster. So kind of being a negotiation partner with these industries. So many of these towns are post-industrial towns, so they have to really consider their how their business is going after this in this situation after industrialization, and they really have to think about what is the their new direction. Then again, we have Enskede here, and what is particular for Enskede is that there is a high number of grassroots level initiatives, so that it is really this coming bottom up, this kind of cooperation drivers. And then third example is L'Aquila. So they are also is a very special example after the they have to think about the recovery after the earthquake. So there is the creative policy of the city is really to develop L'Aquila to become a creative university city. And this I mean that we can't say that it's only one example, but there are several possibilities for regional authorities to interact and collaborate, and just to find out who the partners are, and who is going to take the lead and coordinate the cooperation.
Thank you, Arja, for providing those examples. I think I'll pass on to Ieva again for a final question, but I think, well, I'll let Ieva ask the question.
Yeah, so we are ready to open it. We are, as we all are here as practitioners, scholars, and advocates. So altogether we have this question: how can we better promote the importance of CCIs, and how can we better communicate that culture matters in placemaking? So open question to all panelists and also audience who would like to contribute. Just please raise your hand. While audience is still thinking, panelists, are you ready? Leandro, please.
Well, my opinion is that there is a need for a broad campaign of listening to and consulting communities and more or less formalized groups at local level to help us think of a proactive way of designing the development and cultural and social regeneration, especially for fragile territories, starting from the many experiences already underway, born in the wake of local actions that are often spontaneous or activities thanks to small fundings measures, but profoundly shared by the population, the community cooperatives, the experience of itinerant festivals, as I was mentioning before, consolidated in different areas of the country. I'm of course referring again to Italy, and the many experiences of art residencies, or creative workshops scattered in the various inland and mountainous areas, the extraordinary positive synergy between experiences of innovations and sustainability in agriculture and the experiences of new living and new creativity in rural areas. Even on a particularly fortunate front in terms of local development, such as that of the walking routes, for example, we must think about directing it towards a radical territorial animation action, providing a widespread support for the revitalization of abandoned and depopulated places, marginalized with respect to the major cultural and artistic circuits, and supporting sustainable agriculture and traditional forms of processing the raw materials that are sedimented in localities touched by the root themselves, so that they can become, starting from the narration of belonging and a sense of community, a fundamental lever for territorial regeneration. Our conviction is also that making an inclusive culture of diversity, bringing bodies and their differences back to the center in the design of project to revitalize inland and fragile areas, is not simply, I think, a politically correct detail, but it helps to radically change the perspective on change, on social innovation, and the cultures to be valued and supported in different local realities. All this must somehow be enhanced more and more in the coming years to strengthen an increasingly complex and pluralist idea of placemaking through culture.
Thank you, Leandro. I see that Patrick would like to add something.
Well, no, I don't want to dominate Ieva, but I'll just say two quick things. And the first is, I mean, in answer to your question, it's funding. I mean, we have to fund the cultural and creative sector appropriately. And I suppose it's easy to say that, but part of that is making a better case for culture. And, you know, that again, these are points that Leandro has briefly touched on, and others as well. But I have two key worries that I'm ruminating over as the discussion has gone on, and that is how we're measuring culture. I think we have to get very real about a new set of metrics that are required. You know, the tendency has been, and I've been guilty of this as well, is to use already established metrics and apply it to culture and creativity. You know, we're never going to get the kind of answers that we want, because the kind of metrics that we have were begot of an industrial era. You know, they measure output, they measure productivity, or they measure innovation more laterally. And applying those kind of metrics to culture is always going to undersell the impact of culture. And there's a second thing that I can't but refer to my recently published book again, where I had the opportunity to go much deeper into the whole creative city debate. And that there's a worry, you know, that we have with the adoption of culture and creativity by city authorities, that we're as more and more cities tend to do that, we come towards this uniform kind of idea of what culture and creativity is about. And it all reduces down to, you know, the good looking pictures that I showed you of a place, vibrancy. It's about festivals. It's about the celebration of culture. But the pursuit towards festivalization and this, you know, the manna of the city, creative city moniker is a wholly unsustainable one. You know, you can only celebrate culture for so long if you're not supporting the production of culture. And that's a key kind of distinguishing element, is that the creative city and the adoption of the brands of cultural and creative places tends to focus on cultural consumption. What we really need to do if we're looking towards a sustainable future for CCIs is we have to support cultural production.
Thank you very much. You exactly focused on the same questions we are always discussing with our policymakers and like on a regular basis, especially about already existing established criteria how to measure culture. And they still are looking forward for numbers, numbers, and numbers. So might be some kind of suggestions from market how we could measure love and relationships within culture creative sector.
Well, I would say definitely not in numbers. Yeah, it's a question if that can even be measured. Maybe we would need to come up with completely different ways of thinking about measurements and measuring tools and measuring approaches to measuring anything. And again, we have actually encountered this, what you just mentioned, quite a lot in creatures, that it was a bit of this constant sort of battle with numbers, that this idea of articulate how we can foster change that is happening in forms of relations and in forms of entanglements and involves uncertainties. It was sort of, despite the project was funded, we were sort of, still had to justify on every single step in every single review that this is actually a legitimate way of working, that this actually makes sense. And eventually always ended up submitting some numbers that were real, but we didn't really see the point of having them, like how many people visited our website or... So I would say that especially when we talk about relations and love, this is where numbers really fall short and where they can't really help us to make any kind of change or make sense of the world. But probably we all need to, what was mentioned previously, we all need to try our best, especially in terms of searching funding and highlighting, pushing these approaches actually. So something can actually at some point really change, because if we all keep following these existing roadmaps, these existing approaches just to get the funding, then nothing will ever change. And it's a difficult work, but it's important work.
For sure, it's quite important work. But Jude, would you like to add something from the perspective of artists?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I find that, oops, light's gone off here. Yes, there's a movement underway in the philanthropy sector that is really focusing on equity. And in that, they're focusing on the people that they're serving. And so there's a movement and a change in how they're developing their funding structures. And it's very much about relationships, far more about relationships. Yes, some of them still require the numbers, but they also are asking us about our relationship building and how that is impacting change. So they're looking at learnings from working collaboratively and holistically and how that impacts the outcomes. So both the story and the numbers. So it's changing in the, as I said, in the philanthropic sector. So it really does help to have that movement underway. And then the artists also are requesting funding not for their activities, but to fund themselves. And I think might be something that Patrick had mentioned, is that change how and where the funding is going to. So rather than funding the activities, fund the artists themselves. That will then they can decide how to distribute the money, what activities should develop from there, rather than just funding the activities, which doesn't provide any admin support for actually running organizations and festivals and longer term employment. So those are the two things that I would mention.
Thank you very much. And is there anyone else who would like to contribute, to add some points or?
The question is maybe we can open it out to ask people maybe their own experience or insights on how we can better advocate for the importance of the creative and cultural industries. And we've seen, like, from different perspectives here, that it's about the practicalities of funding, but there's also these deeper intangible things such as care and love going on as well. But if anyone has any comments, or they have some experiences they'd like to share, that would be great as well.
I'd like to add one more thing in response, is that I often work within a social return on investment framework, and it's very localized, and you can align it to whatever the local agenda or priorities are, but it allows that space to look at the holistic piece of what people are doing in the relationship building. But it does require people to be able to conduct that type of research, collect that data, and analyze it in a framework of return on investment. And so there is some capacity building needed in that area. But that is one framework that is more of a stepping stone to the next level, which where we want to really get at is the relationships, and how evaluating and understanding the importance of the relationships. Thank you.
Thank you, Jude. I think I just want to be aware of the time. We did start late, but we are at, well, here in Ireland, we're at 3:30. I know we're coming from different time zones, so if people do need to leave, I'm aware of that. But we do want to keep the discussion going, maybe for another 10 minutes or so. And I see Sylvia has raised her hand. So Sylvia. I'll just check it. Sylvia, do you have a question or a comment you'd like to ask? You're muted, Sylvia. Yeah.
No, we can't.
We're still having trouble here. Do you want to write the comments down and type it? Great.
We also got a comment from Terhi. In Finland, there was an interesting research of measuring cultural well-being. So yeah, there's also a link to the report, which is sadly only in Finnish, but the description is in English. So we can also take a look on that.
And to speak in the positive, I do think that worldwide there is a recognition that we need to change the metrics. We know a very obvious environmental imperative, and that we have been spending the last 50 years talking about GDP and GNP, and that I do think that collectively the world is coming to an understanding that the metrics we've been using need to be rethought, and I hope that there's an opportunity for culture in that rethink.
I see, thanks, Pat. I think Sheila has raised her hand as well.
Yeah, thanks very much, and apologies for being late. I work for the HSE and I have a role as the Healthy Ireland lead for arts and culture. So there are measures being taken to advance creative practice across a wide range of settings. And through people like Creative Ireland, you have initiatives to expand the ecosystem of creative practice at a local level through micro projects that are being initiated in different parts of the country of Ireland. And in addition, there is work going on in terms of place-based creative practice. So I see loads of opportunity for the development of projects, but it's about building an alliance to have a cohesive message. And I think part of that is an issue in terms of translational issues to mainstream about this kind of practice. And I really loved the presentation that Jude gave, because on one PowerPoint or one slide, it totally, had the message of how that happens. So I really enjoyed today, and I am so delighted, and I hope that the slides might be shared with the audience afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila, for your comment and joining us today. We'll follow up. I think maybe the slides can be shared, but I should also say this whole seminar will be posted online as well, so you can also come back to it at a later date. I see Sylvia's hand is up again.
I think you can hear me now.
We've got you, yes.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. Sorry, thank you for this. Sometimes technology gives you this, I want to thank you very much for all these inspiring shares that you have and there's reflections. And I wanted to perhaps just share with you, well, I have some ideas, but just very briefly about coming back to this idea of, as Patrick said, to make culture a better case, and this idea of how to measure, how do we measure culture? And there is, I think it's important to make the policymakers to see that and to realize that there is other ways of seeing culture other than the economic and other than the numbers, right? So it's this not only, I think, the importance of not only having this in practice cases, but also allowing for having more the qualitative research as well. And here I'm referring this and having in mind there are some projects now talking about this measuring culture and measuring the societal impacts of culture. There is one that is uncharted. I'm involved in it, but there is others that MESOC and Event. There are all European projects that talk about this idea of measuring culture and alternatives ways of measuring culture. And I think that we have to the goal, I believe, is to combine the two of types of measures. So this measuring and imagining, if we can say we use that idea, and in order to capture this complexity and multidimensional dynamics of this cultural practices, cultural production, cultural consumption, etc. Both of these approaches, quantitative and qualitative, need to be articulated. And in order to capture not only the numbers, we have those, but also to have this judgment, this attachment, this even the verbal and the non-verbal expressions that we have, these emotional connections and all of that. So having a space to have this more qualitative research aligned with in practice cases, it's key, I believe, to make the better case for the policymakers and for the better fundings. So I think that other than this, encourage an ongoing involvement of the different actors within the cultural sector in the development of the policies. it's also another aspect that needs to be also we keep insisting on that to promote this participation in the design, in the personalization, the monitoring of all the relevant policies. So basically to have an active role, to make culture and the cultural agents to have an active role on the policy making, the policy processes, basically activate this multi-level governments, if we can say. But just want to share this ideas with you. But thank you mostly of all for all these reflections that you share with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia, for that comment and bringing together you know, qualitative research and practice and using that to make a better case for the promotion and advocacy of creative and cultural industries is I might say a good way to kind of almost bring some of the discussion together. Before we finish, I am going to pass over to Nancy Duxbury, who's the head of the In Situ project again. So Nancy, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for all of your contributions and ideas. And we have an unstable internet, so we'll see how this goes. I wanted to, first of all, thank everyone, our hosts, our presenters, and others who have been with us through this 2 hours. But I also wanted to say that we're not alone in these questions. And the United Cities and local governments is in the process of leading an international charge from the city level through to international organizations to fight for there to be a cultural goal in the next iteration of the SDGs. So instead of 17 the goals, there's a hope for 18. The questions that they're asking are very similar to what we've been just discussing here. And I have to think after listening to this that we have collectively something important to offer, because their work is largely based in cities, bigger cities, but also smaller cities and territories. There might be something that we can offer in time that reflects more closely on how cultural work is specifically important in smaller places, in rural places, in ways that might be missed in the big city context, or that are amplified in different ways. And so I think to on one hand, to think that there is this broader movement at force now, that will be looking for collaborators and looking for ideas and looking for new measurements and how to make the argument and through the international system, but it all rests at the bottom at local places and the specificities of local places, and how culture and cultural work is important to the vitality and the continuance and the sustainability, resiliency, and all the rest of those places and the communities that reside. Towards all of this, and just in general, this has been a very rich set of questions and exchanges, and I'm so glad this is recorded. So we will be putting the recordings online, and we'll try to come up with a rapporteur version of some of the key points that have come out of the discussions, so we don't lose this and it can inform our work going forward. It's really clear as well the complexity of non-urban places, which is oftentimes brushed over as a rural area. And of course, that's not true. And bringing those specificities to light are also part of the In Situ mandate. But I do sense this spirit of change, the things that Leandro talked about, this idea of reappropriating the rural in a positive way, and thinking about what it can provide, instead of the usual definitions that are often very negative about all the things that are wrong or not ideal. And I guess to me, it also strikes me the centrality of people as individuals doing their creative work, or in organizations, or collectively, or mentoring one another, or collaborating. and that this is a vision that we really also have to bring forth, that it's not just creative work products, but it comes out of this interaction between people and place and others in that environment. What is that? And I can't read that piece of writing, so that won't be said. But I just wanted to reiterate that I guess a big thank you to the European Commission for funding In Situ and allow the In Situ project until June 2026, so that we have a chance to play what I hope is a role not only in research, but as a seed of discussions among our partners, but as we saw here more widely. The webinar series was designed to bring together different voices and different initiatives and different projects that came across our vision to learn from to learn and exchange and to bring those perspectives together. I see that more are needed and perhaps more focused on some of the refocused on some of the issues that came up today within 2024. So if anyone has ideas for burning topics they'd love to discuss further, we're all ears, and we do hope that the project can be a seed of not only discussions but actions and policy recommendations, but some kind of a central hub within Europe and internationally for cultural and creative workers and those that care about them in non-urban areas, that to sort of fight for the importance of these individuals and their work in these smaller communities, and to, I guess, put messages out there both in an advocacy way, but also in an informed way, but also in a pragmatic way of how best to integrate culture within the broader milieu that are these small communities and territories as they try to reposition themselves and become more stable for the future and all of that. So we're not going away for quite a while, and I really think this and the previous two webinars were great examples of the richness of the approaches that are out there. And the work that's being done. So other projects and other initiatives that haven't had a chance to be showcased quite yet, or we can bring some back. I'm learning of new ones all the time. So we do hope you'll join us again in 2024 as we continue to explore the main messages and perhaps develop it closer to I think it's impossible to have one voice, but it's something that we don't want these discussions to just be lost in the air, but to make sure they feed into our ongoing thinking and work and ideas for what might be done going forward collectively. So I guess, again, a final, just might have stars around, so I was going to say a final thank you, but I have stars to make sure I said the right. Oh, yeah. So in terms of keeping in touch with us, I really encourage you, if you can, to also sign on to one of the social network channels for In Situ Culture, or subscribe to our newsletter only once every 6 months. That's on the bottom of our website, insituculture.eu, so we can keep in touch with you and inform you as the project goes forward and conducts more research and conducts more activities. And I know there's someone here from Croatia, from the Croatian team, to also let you know that In Situ, through the Cultura Nova Foundation as our hosts and key organizers, will be organizing a practice research encounter / conference event next September 2024 in Šibenik, Croatia, which is one of our lab areas. And more information on that will be provided in January. So again, we hope to inform you of more information on that. Yes, Georgie.
I also want to thank you for the information and wish you a good evening. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
you.
Very good last note. So
Yeah.
thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mark and Ieva, sorry, and all of our presenters today. This has been really rich and thought-provoking.
Yes, thank you to our presenters, Patrick and Jude and Leandro. and Marketa and Arya, and for your insights and kind of wisdom and sharing your research and practice as well. And thank you for everyone in the audience who's taken part tonight, taking time today to join the discussion. This is recorded and it will be available on the In Situ website in the future. So on our YouTube channel. So keep up with that. I think on behalf of myself and Ieva, thank you for joining us, and on behalf of the In Situ project as well. And I realize we've run a bit over time, but we started a bit late as well. So thanks for your time. Yeah. So we might say goodbye to each other.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you
Bye-bye,
very
everyone.
much.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.